Hey, welcome to the Gig Life Podcast. I'm your host, Stevie Taylor. I hope you're good and doing your best. I just wanted to let you know that you can subscribe to the Gig Life Podcast. Go to thegiglifepodcast.com, scroll to the bottom of that first page and click on the red button. Pick your favourite podcast app and hit that subscribe button. You can even set it to automatic downloads so all those new episodes get delivered straight to your app. Also, if you dig this episode or any of the others, please share it with your friends or on your socials. And also, just a reminder that this podcast is free, always has been, always will be. But if you find some value in it, you can drop us a donation. All donations go back into the making of this podcast. Just head over to thegiglifepodcast.com and click on the donate button and roll with it. Sweet. Episode 91, Hollie Smith. Here we go.
The one that they want around me, yeah. I don't ever want to say that you can't just I don't ever want to.
My guest today is Hollie Smith. Hollie is one of New Zealand's most predominant and iconic musicians. After working with numerous bands including Trinity Roots, Fat Freddy's Drop, and Detroit dance legend Recluse, she was approached by New Zealand songwriting royalty Don McGlashan to perform on a movie soundtrack single, Bathe in the River, that topped the New Zealand singles charts and became one of the biggest and iconic singles in New Zealand's history. This set the stage for Hollie's debut album, Long Player, released in 2007, which went straight to number one on the New Zealand charts. The album reached multi-platinum status and was followed with sold-out tours, then saw her take away several New Zealand Music Awards that year, which included Best Producer, Best Female Solo Artist, and Breakthrough Artist of the Year. Hollie has gone on to record 2 more solo albums, Humour and the Misfortune of Others, and Water or Gold, and she has recently begun production on a long-awaited new album. Hollie Smith is a prolific, hardworking singer-songwriter and performer, and has also maintained a highly respected reputation of creating music with the utmost integrity and passion, not to mention her incredible live performances and powerhouse vocals. I'm extremely honoured to have gotten to sit and chat with Hollie for this podcast. So ladies and gentlemen, please sit back and open your ears to some of the life and times of Hollie Smith. I think we're rolling. Welcome to the Gig Life Podcast, Hollie Smith.
Thank you very much. It's my first podcast. Very excited.
Is it really? Oh, wow. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said to you earlier, you sent me an email saying, did you have to put makeup on? Is it only audio? And I said, absolutely. It's only audio. I'm not wearing my makeup. I've only got a face for audio. I can't handle the video stuff. Yeah,
no, that's why podcast is so great.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah, we're just talking a little bit about lockdown and how things here in Australia have started to deteriorate a little bit out of Melbourne. Yeah, just look up the news, people, and you'll see what's going on there. I'm curious to know how you sort of dealt with lockdown when it hit New Zealand, and what you kind of had on the boil, and what sort of blew out for you with the lockdown.
Yeah, it's a funny one, eh? Like we, obviously things sort of kicked off and Jacinda, sort of kicked into gear pretty quickly, I mean, obviously there was conversations and political kind of statements and whatnot, but essentially, like after a little while of us being all very aware of the situation, she did the whole, okay, we're in level 3 for 2 days and then we're going to level 4. And, so it's kind of one of those sort of weird historical moments where you'll know exactly where you were when you were watching that sort of statement. But for me personally, I was supposed to be recording the new record, which was long overdue anyway, in April.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously that went out the window because it was in Wellington.
So sorry, where are you now?
I'm in Auckland.
You're in
New
Auckland.
Zealand.
Yep.
Yeah. And then, yeah, I mean, within, like a week, the whole entire year of scheduled gigs were pulled, and my agents are good friends of mine as well, and they were just like, we just literally had emails and calls every single second for their, sort of 20 plus artists with every show cancelled for the rest of the year, so it's been, it was pretty surreal in that regard. But obviously, the bigger picture, taking that into consideration, it was, it's like, okay, well, we're all in the same boat, right? So it's just a bit of a big push pause button, we hope, and, that things will start kicking off again once we're able to get going again. I mean, at one point in lockdown, like full lockdown, like there was a news thing where someone was saying, like there's definitely not going to be any gigs larger than 100 people, at least till the end of the year. And that got me pretty upset for a few days. Just sort of going like, finally it was my year to do another album after years. And it's like, seriously, man, I know it's not about me, but fuck.
Yeah, you're true.
It's like, really, this year? But, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I'm super lucky. My partner's got, like a solid job, which is in finance. So he's been super busy. So, pretty lucky on the front of, I'm not looking at being evicted or, I'm in a pretty lucky position. So it was probably the most grateful I've ever felt for my situation, to be fair.
Yep.
You can always find holes in it. But this was a time where I was definitely like, man, I got absolutely nothing to complain about. It's I'm super lucky and grateful for everything I've got going on. So pretty surreal situation, which is still happening.
Yeah. Did you, like, you were about to head down and start recording your album? Did you have it basically all written, or have you taken this time now to maybe write some more stuff to add to it, or change or tweak some things, or did you sort of just leave that and go do something else?
No, I've actually had these songs for ages.
Yep.
I definitely could have done this 2 years ago, to be honest, but then I was kind of going to do an interim album and do a bit of a jazz thing, which I'd like to do at some point, but that ended up sort of lagging and, just relying on too many people to do things, and just didn't happen. And then I was like, okay, well, I've got to start on my record now, and so I had it all ready to go. But yeah, so it was funny during lockdown. Like I've actually talked to quite a few artists about this who just didn't feel creative at all during that time. Like I think just the energy was so subdued and calm. Like there was no electricity or sort of energy to claim anything off. It was I just so many people I talked to didn't create anything, which we all thought would be such a beautiful, wonderful time to be able to sit down and focus on something. But and because I've sort of written everything, I didn't want to sit down and start writing new stuff and kind of get confused about what I was focusing on. So and because it was all kind of ready to go, so pretty much I just played a lot of PlayStation.
I've been playing heaps of Nintendo Switch, heaps of FIFA. It's been good. Yeah. All right, let's roll back now, right to the beginning, how it all sort of started for you, your early childhood musical family.
Mum, not so much. My dad is an amazing guitarist. He still plays sort of blues rock kind of cover gigs kind of stuff, Jimi Hendrix, old school funk stuff, and his dad was a saxophonist and a drummer, and so like there's definitely a little bit of a musical swing through that side. So I grew up with mum and dad until they separated when I was about 5. So it was just me and my sister, who's 4 years older. And so it was just been mum and my sister. Dad was semi-present, sort of every couple of weekends or whatever. So not so much of his musical influence on a daily basis, but definitely still kicking in along the way. what else? I mean, yeah, basically just started singing in choirs when I was, at school, and before that, was sort of singing before I could talk, apparently, and writing songs and rocking around the house with a hairbrush kind of vibe. In primary school, definitely was singing heaps. Had really supportive music teachers, which was great. But yeah, pretty much just rolling along that kind of thing. And then intermediate, the first song I wrote was in intermediate. It was my friend Julia. She played piano and I wrote it. It was like an Auckland composition competition. It was like you had to write a song about Auckland, and I still remember it was like it was called the City of Sails. And that ended up becoming a school song, and I had to sing it like every assembly to school's dismay. And it had to be rolled out on the OHP, overhead projector for people to.
We used to bomb those things, eh? We used to steal the pens. We used to steal the pens when the teacher would go up the back and draw on them, and that was awesome. Yeah,
just cock and balls everywhere. So it was just, sort of that kind of format through that. And then, so started writing about then, started getting a bit more serious in high school, went to Northcote College, which had an incredible big band, jazz big band. And at that point I was really into sort of blues and jazz stuff. So
who were some of the artists you were listening to at that stage?
Early on, kind of James Brown, Jimi Hendrix, from early.
Yep.
Like I think my first cassette was Kylie Minogue, Australia. I think everyone's first cassette tape was probably Kylie Minogue. And then
mine was Wham. Sorry.
Well, how old are you?
I'm 44.
Yeah, so I'm the 80s, early 80s.
Okay, right, gotcha.
Kind of. Yeah, I mean, lots of dad's influence came through on that level, but then also at the same time, the James Brown thing was a bit separate. Ray Charles, Jimi Hendrix, not really too many female artists that I can recall apart from the more pop stuff that I was listening to, But yeah, sort of all that kind of stuff, and then went to Northcote College to essentially be a part of the jazz band. Started doing gigs independently of that as well when I was about 13, around like sort of jazz clubs and stuff. And then the Northcote College Jazz Band was pretty profound. Like we went to Manly Jazz Festival most years. They got invited to Montreal Jazz Festival, which was kind of the year I arrived, so I didn't quite get on that boat. And heaps of jazz festivals around New Zealand, and, so it was a pretty significant band, which was led by Dee Skysinger, who's an American teacher who came over, and he's hilarious. Used to chain smoke, like while running the band in a school. Had a toupee, used to smoke out the door and just be like, yeah, it's good. But he was incredible, and he mentored a lot of us to become professional musicians. And so he was, pretty pivotal point in my little musical life.
So what's a big bit of advice you sort of took away from him then?
Well, it was just when I was doing the first track that I did with the jazz band, which was God Bless the Child. And he kind of just was like, he kind of at one point was just like, hey, do you know the words? Do you know what you're singing about? And I was like, yeah, I know all the words, like, whatever. And he's like, okay, well, sit down and read the words and listen to the words. And then kind of gave me a little bit of a 101 on what that represented in the bigger scale of, life. And about the Black rights movement, civil rights movement, all of the different things that were so pained in Billie Holiday's voice and performance, and who is recognised for, obviously, and that just really made a very serious dent in my mentality moving forward with my music and singing other people's music. That was sort of when I learned how to, I guess, feel a song opposed to sing a song.
Yeah, right, okay.
So from that point on, it wasn't about, being perfect. It was about, knowing what you were singing about and applying your intent into every syllable that you could possibly get across. That's more important than anything. And so that was a really a strong a pivotal point in my songwriting and definitely in my performance. It became a lot more. I mean, I never was, like a show pony kind of outward performer, and I still are. I'm still not, but that gave me a different momentum on stage. Like it was more about what I was singing about opposed to sounding good or what people thought or anything like that. If someone left knowing what the intent was of that song, then I was doing my job. So he was amazing in that, and he was just a real hard ass. It wasn't until I was in fifth form and won a few awards at the national jazz competition here in Tauranga. I got like best vocal, and we had like best combo and best arrangement. And at the end of it, so we're standing outside, and I got my trophy. I'm all pretty chuffed about it all, and he's just like, "No, you did pretty good today, mate." That was just like, "Oh my god," he said, "I did good." Yeah. And so he made you work for it, and so that was incredible, and lots of amazing musicians came out of that school because of him. He's and still in touch with him, years later, and he's still a crazy, hilarious dude. Yeah.
All right, that's cool. All right, so out of high school now, what are we starting to do? Did you finish high school?
Well, basically, because I'm not classically trained, sixth form was all performance. In which I got almost 100%, very high marks in that. But with seventh form, it was 70% theory, which I couldn't do. So I had good enough marks in sixth form to kind of leave and be accepted to university had I wanted to go. And so they basically said, look, you can't really come back because you can't come back and not do music. And if you do music, you're going to fail miserably. So we commend you on your journey and you're free to go kind of thing. So that's pretty much what happened. And then so I just started working in bars.
Right. And you're still in Auckland? No, you went down to Tauranga, didn't you? Yep. No.
That was the jazz festival there at the time. So sorry. I was still in Auckland at this point.
Yep. And
started working in a cafe bar that I had done a number of gigs at. Pretty loose environment, which because I had no skills whatsoever was pretty good for me. But ended up being there for quite some time. Was sort of semi-managing it by the end of it. There for about 4 years. Still doing a few gigs, but that definitely, doing the hospo thing, kind of trying to be an adult whilst definitely not acting like one for a long time. Was also bartending and managing a bar called Control Room, which is a pool hall on Queen Street in the CBD. And so I played a lot of pool, did a lot of pool competitions whilst running bars. So, so that took things away. I was still doing some stuff, but definitely got a little bit too caught up on that. So ended up, after one of my bands kind of went a bit south, I took off down to Wellington, which is where my mum had moved to a few years prior.
Okay.
And that was when I started working with the likes of Trinity Roots, which was really another pivotal point in my musical journey. It was when I did, on Fat Freddy's Drop album, Recluse, a DJ who from Detroit who lived in Wellington for a spell. And, sort of that whole, the Wellington kind of pickup got me going pretty seriously then, and had a bunch of residencies with sort of jam bands that I was hanging out with, like members of Shifters and Freddy's and all sorts of people, significant bands now, but, just sort of us sitting in the corner of a dirty bar, getting a free feed and some drinks and doing that every week, So did that for a long time until I realised that if I didn't stop doing that, then nothing would really progress. So I stopped doing regular gigs.
Progress in regards to your own music. Is that what you mean?
Well, I think just like, when you're being seen all the time in New Zealand, it's not like over in Australia where you can, play a different venue every night, every night for a month and, not have the same audience. Wellington's little, had the same people coming every week and had really, really good crowds and all that kind of thing. But then I sort of knew that I had to not be so accessible to create my own audience with my own music as well. So yeah, I took a break from that and started rehearsing up my band, and about 4 months later put on a show, sold it out at 600 with about another 200 people around the block kind of thing, so it was a pretty good start. And yeah, basically went from there and continued on that for a long time until and then I kind of decided not to do collaborations anymore, because I'd been doing these sort of guest spots and things, and then I kind of pulled the pin on that and just went, no, I'm going to focus on my stuff, no more collabs, and started working on my record, my debut record. And then
I see you'd released your EP and stuff by then, is that right?
Yeah, so that was a little bit earlier on. That was with Warren Maxwell from Trinity. So that I can't even remember those songs, to be completely honest.
Okay.
That was just like a little. It's funny because some people absolutely still adore that and still talk about it. And I wish I've got a couple of CDs somewhere lying around, but I've got nothing to play them on.
You should relearn them. You should relearn them, because if the fans are coming up wanting to talk to you, well, what about that part and such, and you're going, yeah, don't fucking remember.
I do that with most of my songs, to be fair.
Yeah, right.
But after that point, just sort of went, sort of no to that, focus on my stuff, get prepped and ready to go. And then Don McGlashan rang me, New Zealand music royalty legend from the Mutton Birds and all that kind of thing. And he rang me and he was like, hey, I'm doing this movie score. I'd really like you to come and do this song. It's just, a part of the movie, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, yeah, I'll do one more. Yeah, okay. And basically walked into the studio, sang it like 4 times, walked out of the studio, and then it just went crazy. It was one of the biggest selling New Zealand singles in history. It was, sort of everywhere. It was obviously at that time for me, it was I was not into it.
Okay.
Because obviously because it had like a gospel thing and it was very much my kind of style, which hadn't really been done in New Zealand or anything. And my whole album was that. And it kind of came in just before I was about to release. And obviously, opened doors and lots of people knew my name and all that kind of thing.
Sure.
But it kind of was a pretty, it's like, shit, like what would have happened if I had my music out before that, would that have done the same thing, or is it just because it's an amazing song? Right. Yeah.
So that song's called, pardon me, that song's called Bathe in the River, for the people that don't know, so go check that out. But go check Hollie's other albums out first. Do that first.
No, I've learned to love both.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, it was an interesting journey with that song. Like I refused to play it live when I released my stuff. I only played it with Don for special occasions, but so it became pretty special because of that as well. But I refused to sort of play it live just because it wasn't my music. I didn't write it. This is my project. That's not my project. Did
that alienate some fans? Did people kind of get
shit? Yeah, I had a lot of hate mail over that one.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I had. I mean, most people understood after seeing my show. Like most people walked away pretty happy,
Yep.
And got it, because I would say, like, obviously they'd expect it for an encore or something, and I'd sort of explain that that's not going to happen, and I apologise for those people who expect it, but this is my reasoning. So I was pretty open and honest about it. I didn't just like walk off and not do it. And so some people were supportive of that, and obviously some people were openly disappointed, which, obviously is understandable, being the big hit and all. But it was, this is when I was 10 foot tall and bulletproof, like start of my career, and
So just
I didn't want to be dictated by another song, essentially, that wasn't mine, because I wanted to be known as a songwriter and a producer, not just a singer.
Yeah.
So.
Can you just sort of paint a picture of how big that song actually became? I mean, I could sit here and read through the awards and all that sort of stuff, but
it was number one for a long time for that period. It was just sort of, there had only been so many New Zealand sort of number ones at that point. We're talking 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So there's only been so many iconic songs that had kind of had that reputation prior. I mean, now it's completely different, obviously, but back then it was, it was a pretty big deal. Because I didn't really, not sure about money because it's important, but, it wasn't my song, so I didn't get any publishing on it. I just sung it and, got paid $500 or something to do the session, and then, so that was that, really. And so on every level, I was quite detached from the song and the process, which, but then again, obviously it did help my reputation a lot. So I was really grateful for that also. But, it's sort of almost like what would have happened if my album had come out first. I can't compete with Don McGlashan's songwriting, let's be fair. But he's, I think it was more the style of music and just something that hadn't really been heard here on a high level, which, I sort of, as much as obviously I wouldn't at all think that I'm on level with Don's songwriting, I'm just wondering what would have happened if my music had come out first, because I've sort of always been in the shadow of that song since.
Sure, right.
Which I'm not bitter about at all. I'm now really grateful. It was just the process at the time that was sort of like that, and now super grateful, and I love singing that track, and just because it's been played at funerals, it's been played at weddings.
Yep.
Just so it means so much to so many people. And I guess, sort of got back to that point of what's music important? What's it for? And, why would I try and deny this from people who it's so important to, So it was more just me going through the process of my own ego and my musical journey before I could get to the point where it's like, it doesn't matter if I sing other people's songs. There's only me in this musical bubble. They're not in it with me. They don't understand why. And, if they love it and really need to have it with them, then I shouldn't be denying anyone that, So, but now it's incredible, there's always a big sing-along. It's a bit of an old school anthem now. So,
and you still play that in all your live sets?
Yeah, I do now. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So, yeah, I have for years now, but yeah,
okay.
Again, I'm old and it's such an old song.
Yeah, okay, so your album that let's say was in line with that. I'm not going to say precede that because that album's called Long Player, and
Long Player, yeah.
Yep, I love that album. I think it's awesome. So can you talk a little bit about the album, the process? Was that your first, or that was your first solo album that you'd been involved with?
Yeah.
Were you getting into the production of the songs? Did you just write the songs, or did you have a producer? Would you just go to your producer and say, I've got the song, make it sound like this, or were you sort of hands-on in the whole thing?
Pretty hands-on. So I wrote all the songs and pretty much arranged all the parts.
Because you play piano, you play guitar.
That album was written on piano.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't playing guitar so much at that. Well, I did prior, but I wasn't playing guitar at that point.
Yep.
So I got a producer involved. So we were kind of co-producing. I must say it ended up being quite a difficult process. In the studio, it got pretty toxic. Like, he was definitely trying to steer things in one way, but just doing it in a way that wasn't, in my opinion, and the people that we were working with found it very controlling and wasn't. It just wasn't an enjoyable time. There was a lot of tears and a lot of sort of frustration, and and everyone was being very well looked after. In several different manners, but it was just, it was a bit of a, got pretty disillusioned about it pretty quickly, and it was all pretty upsetting, but sort of stuck to my guns and got what I wanted out of it. Like the engineer, for example, wasn't going to allow him to re-enter that studio at any point.
Right.
Afterwards, so it was just an awkward, slightly uncomfortable setting for a lot of it. Well, obviously, the pressure made. Well, I stuck to my guns, and I'm proud of that record. I haven't listened to it a lot. I get a bit emotional about it all. But when we finished that record, my management took it to a few international labels, and Blue Note Records in New York got on board, and Bruce Lundvall, who was the head of head of Blue Note from about 82. He was sort of the one who brought it back into fashion with Nora Jones and that kind of thing. But still, it was sort of the label known to have the most kind of artist, sort of the artist at the heart of the project. I'm losing my vocabulary, but it was just a really respectful label in that regard, and there was no problems with creative control and all that kind of thing. So it was pretty much a dream come true. Like, obviously, knowing every artist on that label being from a jazz and blues background, it was pretty exciting. But this was before Lord, and this was before Kimbra. This was sort of like the first New Zealand international major record label that had been sort of talked about. So all of a sudden it just went massive. Mm-hmm. Media, everything. It was a pretty full on time. But along with that, we're still kind of, can't really remember the timeline. Like, we're still kind of in discussions about certain things, but I'd already paid everyone and blah blah. But it got pretty nasty in regards to. Although we'd had oral agreements, and my previous manager, had sort of dropped the ball on getting all of the contracts and stuff that I wanted to be, sort of in place before we went to record. Mm. So that kind of, the ball was dropped there, and then when the Blue Note thing got signed, it got pretty full on in regards to everyone thought that I had just made like $1 million or something, and kind of got attack left, right, centre in that regard.
What, people coming after your money, basically?
Yeah, money I didn't have, but money they assumed that I'd be getting, because it was a major label deal from America, so obviously it would have had heaps of zeros on it,
right?
Which absolutely was not the case. But it got to the point where there was no discussion about it, and just some pretty aggressive tactics to try and get amongst it with, I wouldn't say suing because we can't sue, but there was, lots of lawyers and lots of sort of horrible situations to go through, and especially because obviously these are people I consider friends and long-time friends at that. And so it was kind of a pretty rude introduction to how quickly that shit can change, when actually nothing had actually changed, right? Because I hadn't received anything. So it was all that kind of thing, which was pretty difficult to deal with. But we still got on with it. Went to New York, spent a lot of time in New York, which was epic. Had a great time. And basically, a couple of the songs they wanted to remove and do a few new songs, which I wrote. And so I ended up going to Philadelphia with James Poyser, who he's multi-Grammy award-winning producer. He did Erykah Badu's stuff. He's an amazing keyboard player. He plays with The Roots now, with the Jimmy Fallon stuff.
Yep.
Part of the whole sort of new soul era from Philadelphia, sort of the D'Angelos and the Lauryn Hills and Erykah's and stuff. So he was pretty incredible, obviously, to work with. Adam Blackstone played bass on that on those tracks, which you can hear on the record. Then he played with like Kanye, he was playing with Angie Stone, just some pretty, some big time shit happening, which was amazing. We were in the OK Player Studios, which was the studio where the Roots have, and it was a pretty amazing experience. And I was just there on my own for like 3 weeks doing this. So it was all quite terrifying, but incredible.
Just on those songs that he produced and put on that album, which songs are they?
So it was kind of the re-release of Long Player, which was so I think there was one, I can't even remember the songs. There was a New Dawn, there was Miracles, which I still really like. New Dawn, and there was a third. So we did a sort of a deluxe edition of Long Player, which had the Philadelphia sessions on it. Okay. So those three songs,
okay.
that James did, so pretty epic time, like absolutely loved it. It was all in, just going, no one can stop me, it's going to be amazing. And then basically everything was looking good. We'd signed a contract, because I owned all the masters. I paid for everything, independent artist. And then when Blue Note signed, I then had to go with EMI because it's a subsidiary of. So they allowed New Zealand to be separate from the global deal. But I just had to go with EMI because for distribution, P&D, so publicity and distribution. So that was all pretty solid until I was just wrong place, wrong time, and for the first time ever, EMI, which was essentially still the only official independent record label, still left as a major. A company called Terra Firma bought it for about $5 billion, 4.8, I think, and that rocked the boat in a pretty heavy way in regards to the structure of the company. And the two heads of these companies who I was dealing with a lot because at this point I sort of travelled around the world and talked to the heads of EMI, because as soon as it leaves America it goes into a global EMI kind of conglomerate. And, so I'd met all these people and we're like, we know it's not a mainstream album, and it was just when digital started happening. So we started deciding that we'd work it on a more digital platform and just sort of play with different things it could do. And everyone was pretty stoked about that. The contract was signed, so within the contract they had to release the album within 4 months. And then essentially what happened was they kind of put a hold on that because we were in negotiations about maybe redoing a little bit of it because they really wanted to push it massive. This is now the head of EMI, so this has gone above all of the umbrella companies. And I was like, yeah, that's cool, but we're already kind of so far through it. Can we negotiate on the next record, where this is all done, recorded, we've all, we're to the point where we're doing long lead press and all that kind of thing. And then basically they just sort of rang and said, oh, we're not going to release your record. And I was like, okay, sweet, that's cool, because I had other offers on the table. And I was like, we'll dissolve the contract and move on. That's fine. That's unfortunate. You've wasted a year of my life, but whatever. And they were like, and I'm like, well, no, because we own your masters. I was like, nope. You own 3 songs that you paid for, because I didn't receive any money, but they paid for those 3 songs they wanted to do. And they were like, no. I was like, literally breaching contract. And they, on a conference call with some of the biggest people in music at the time, they just said, we're a $4 billion corporation, what are you going to do about it?
Fuck.
And so that was where that was left. And so they wouldn't give me my record back, basically. And because it was my first record, I was so attached to it. It's like my baby, it's like 5-7 years worth of work. So I kind of wasn't gonna allow that to happen. So I was like, well, I'd rather sue you than, because at one point they said you can buy the masters back for X amount, which was everything they'd spent or something. And I was like, yeah, but I've spent this. So I offset heaps of stuff, and then basically it got into like a pretty nasty sort of legal situation where I was going to try and take them to court, and then I had 2 different American lawyers and a New Zealand lawyer, and after a number of months back and forth. They were just like, you will be doing this for the next 5-10 years of your life. You'll win because you like they breach contract, but there's just, if you want to waste your energy and time on it, then sure, but there's just no, like just let it go kind of thing. And so I ended up buying my master's back, and then that was that, which I then by that point I could do nothing with because it was kind of done and done at that point.
Had they signed you to like a multi-album sort of deal, and did you end up kind of getting shelved in that sense, or did they just kind of own that album, try and
just that one album, but then they had like an option for a second, so that's why until we settled, I didn't want to write or release any music just in case they went hardball. So, so that's where that period of my life got pretty dark because I couldn't produce any new music. I couldn't do anything with the music I produced. And because I was sort of, ramping up this trajectory of my career, which had just gone sky high at that point, like everyone thought I was living in New York and, doing some amazing things and was about to explode. But realistically, I was sitting in Auckland very fucking depressed, sort of not knowing what to do. And that's why the second record took 4 years because I was pretty much like, I'm done. Like that was enough to kind of cripple my spirit for sure. But then financially as well. And then because obviously with the second record, because I'd sort of depleted all my funds on trying to, live for that time, but also pay for all of the shit that was going on. So by the time the second record came around, like I didn't have enough to back up my reputation with marketing or anything else. So it still went really well, but there was a limited kind of amount of, there was no momentum that followed through basically. So sort of felt like I've always been a little bit on the back foot in that regard. And I mean, I've talked to, I opened for Coldplay when they were in Auckland. And ended up, he's amazing. Chris Martin's great. He watched all of our shows prior, and and then after the show, we went out. And at this point, I was pretty damn bitter about it. And he was just like, "What's going on? Let's just go, have a drink. Tell me about it." And sort of just went, "Where?" And he almost was in tears. He was like, "I've never heard. I've heard that this shit happens all the time, right? But not with an unknown young artist from a country that, they've got nothing to gain by it, this is just sort of a real dollars and cents, but down to the cents for them. This is, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, if that. So we're not talking big scale on their level by any stretch. So it was just he was just like, I can't even fathom why this has happened. He was so, he was appalled and talked to a lot of people about it. And although these stories exist obviously all the time in the industry, it was just such a bizarre one because there was no money involved. There was no investment from them. That it was just a weird sort of standstill. But it definitely affected me, and I wasn't sure if I was sort of going to continue in music after that. But, once you're in music, you can't get out of it evidently. And, and so it's just sort of continued, and it's always just been since then I've found it quite difficult in regards to figuring out whether or not, I just sort of feel like music's sort of like chasing the dragon a bit, right? You kind of, you sort of get to a finish line, but you're not done. There's no finish line. There's never an end point. You're just striving for something more and more and more and more. Yeah. And regardless of all the successes that I had at that point, which were quite huge, which would be considered huge for a lot of people. Yep. For me, it was just no, because I'm going to take over the world. I'm going to do this and this and this.
So that was your thought as this start. This is before all the shit happened. You're going, I'm here, but I'm going to keep going. Okay.
Yeah, but not in an arrogant way. Like just
No, I know what you're saying.
worked,
Yeah.
you know, like I worked really hard, and you know, sort of situations presented themselves, and I went, yeah, and then worked really, really hard. Like I didn't have much of a relationship with my family. I didn't have friends. You know, like it was, you know, this was my life since since I was 13, and then from sort of 19, 20, you know, like it was never really this was just sort of the journey that I was always going to be on. So I didn't have any doubt. Like I wanted to be the first New Zealand to win a Grammy. I wanted to be the first New Zealand to win, like I just had that in my head. Those were my goals. So you kind of got to a point, and then other people started doing it. It was like, shit, damn it, it was going to be me one day. But then other things become important in regard, sort of, because shit got so low, I had to rely on other people and friends and family to kind of get me through it. And I was like, oh, you guys are pretty neat. You guys are great. I really love you fellas. And so, so as much as I would love to get back overseas and do everything, I mean, financially it's not really possible. I mean, a few years ago we went to Montreal Jazz Festival. We were invited over there. And so, huge investment to get, 7 people from New Zealand over to Canada for, it was a massive show. We played to 50,000 people. It was the biggest show I've ever done. It was, all the merch sold out within about 40 minutes, just, people raving about it. And it was amazing. But, the problem is that I couldn't get back there the next year because I lost so much money getting over there to do that. And it's just sort of that constant, like, what do we risk going for? And if we do get it and it does go well, how do we follow it up? And that's, it's frustrating. Like I really want to be doing more and getting out there and going overseas and touring and it's not about not wanting to do it. It's just the fact that the possibility is very low with the amount of money it takes to travel from New Zealand to do anything, really. Yeah.
Did you get to tour long player?
In New Zealand, we did big theatres here.
Okay.
For the release tour.
Yep.
We did a bunch of shows in Australia, and I didn't really we did a couple of showcases in the States, but not sort of the full band search. Like for example, like the release gig in Wellington, we had like a 30-piece gospel choir, sort of like a eight-piece sort of band, 4 BVs. It was huge. So like we've had some amazing shows. It's been great. I mean, but it's just sort of trying to balance being in New Zealand strategically with the population and the fact that like I'm not the new fish. It can get quite difficult and just figuring out how to make it work and on all the levels, sort of musically being interesting to people, being happy about what I'm delivering to people. With the oversaturation now in New Zealand of like so much New Zealand music and such amazing New Zealand music. A lot of the artist sharing they do with Australia as well. So all of the festivals and things, there's a lot more internationals coming down, which, people save up, months to go to, a AC/DC show or a Justin Bieber show in Auckland. So it's just, there's really no guarantee on any tour at any particular time that's going to really lock in that pocket of interest and just knowing that you're going to have a good tour with a good outcome and financially be stable enough to get through it, So it's, I mean, and the music, I mean, from when Long Player released, in which, had a huge revenue gig-wise and because there was album sales,
Yeah, that's right.
And it was a double or triple platinum album,
Yep.
And then even to the second record, which was 4 or 5 years later, I didn't recoup that album. It took a year, about 14 months to recoup that album, which was a bit of a shock because I was like, okay, yeah, it'll be different, but, invest everything, make some return. And it was like, oh, shit, maybe not. And then, the last record, the third record, again, that was never going to break even. And it was just about working our asses off on the road. Because, and now it's just difficult in regards to how do you create an amazing album when there's nothing that can offset those costs, unless you've got like a major single on Spotify.
Yep.
Then, even that, 8 million hits on one song is probably going to, just pay off a record,
Yep.
So that's a hell of a lot. And, so it's the industry is just so different. And because my mentality is still, sort of pretty old school of loving to create bodies of work and loving to create albums.
Yep.
So that's what I love doing. So I kind of, get right in the pocket to go, yeah, I'm ready and we're going to make this sort of body of work. But now releasing a body of work like that now, it doesn't translate.
Sorry, my webcam died. Hang on, here we go. Other camera. Camera 2.
Camera 2.
Sorry. You're just talking about the third album, which is Water or Gold.
Yeah, Water or Gold.
Yep.
So, I guess it's just the progression over the way that the music industry landscape has changed in the last decade has been so significant. I find it really difficult, and I think a lot of people do, to find exactly what avenue you're supposed to take. Because there's, a lot of the, new artists coming through, are technically more adept, that, they're creating things in their garage, they're creating music on their own, they've got really high production skills, whereas all of the albums I've done have been, album-based live records, which are now so difficult to get done on a low budget. So it's kind of just sort of balancing and figuring out how to now utilize this new environment that we find ourselves, that we're now in,
Mm-hmm. Have you had much help from New Zealand On Air with funding and stuff like that?
New Zealand On Air is incredible, yeah. They've been very, very supportive of me over the years. So I've had funding for this record, which I'm working on now, which is super exciting. Totally already blown it out of the water, but because I got excited, and I've got the NZSO on it, I've got the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra on it, and awesome. I'm pretty good at also going right. I'm going all in and going deep, and so it'll be amazing. But
Okay, well, you've actually answered a bunch of my questions in your talk in there regarding, I was going to ask you about, do you have a sort of home studio set up with gadgets and stuff like that to be able to do that sort of stuff yourself? If you do, or if you don't, what's your process in writing? Like, do you just sit at your piano and just record that and then have the idea in your head and take it to some people, or do you kind of put a full demo together at home or that kind of thing?
These days I'm kind of just more sitting down, writing a basic track. This album, which has been just me sort of sitting down, writing a track and keeping it really, really basic. Like I haven't expanded on it too much. I haven't arranged parts. I haven't gone too deep and tried to let it sort of organically. Because these songs are a lot simpler. Like the melodies are simpler, the structures are simpler, the chordal structure's simpler, so I don't want to overcomplicate it. And so with these tracks, I've just sort of sat down and written the track and then sort of left it at that. And then once we get in the studio, we've done the arrangements for the NZSO, so we've recorded those bits. because of COVID, obviously, we couldn't record in April. So now the whole record is literally being pieced back to front.
Yep.
With people's availability and how.
Yeah, because we were going to be doing this last week, but you said, "Oh, I can't. We've got to go. I've got to go to Wellington.
Yeah,
I'm going to work with the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra." So yeah, okay.
Yeah, pretty much. So. So that kind of, so basically the first day in the studio for this record was with the NZSO, which was mind-blowing. I've never worked with an orchestra, let alone that one. So pretty huge, epic, like, holy shit, I've now got to make the rest of the record live up to that. So now I'm fucking terrified, but super excited and, I've done I did some demos prior to lockdown so I could go into the studio with the band and all that kind of stuff. So there's things there that I'm just sort of listening through and figuring out how I can make it all come together. But yeah, essentially sit down and do it. And I've got like the most basic setup of just literally a mic underneath a baby mattress, which I've hung from the ceiling with buttons and fishing line. And I'm not kidding.
No, I believe you.
I can even show you.
Okay, sweet.
So there's both, and then up there, so it's hanging from fishing line, which I've hung on hooks and then put buttons through the mattress. It's very Kiwi ingenuity going on there. But yeah, guitar or piano, write those songs, and now I don't get too involved in everything else. My musicians are incredible, and I trust them to create whatever. I don't need to direct them too much. They generally know where I'm going with things these days. So I just cross my fingers and hope for the best.
So are you working with the same musicians you've worked with for the last bunch of years?
Darren, my drummer, yes.
Yep.
He's been on all the records. Dan Hales was on the last record, but that's 4 years ago now. So I've been working with him for a while. So he'll be on board. And normally I work with Marika Hodgson, who's incredible.
Bass player.
She's been my bass player for years. We play together all the time. But I am using a different bass player just totally logistically for logistic reasons that I'm doing everything down in Wellington. I don't have the budget to kind of get her down and all that kind of shit. So it's not unfortunate. Johnny Lawrence, who I'm using, is absolutely a demon as well. I'm incredibly lucky, but yeah, just logistically that made sense that they could rehearse together while I'm not there in Wellington and all that kind of thing. And Marika's incredibly busy with a number of different things as well. So that's how that rolled out. So it's all, at the moment, it's fingers crossed. I'll be going into the studio with the band at the end of, mid-August. Yep. And hopefully maybe have a singer out November. And we're probably, realistically speaking, we're probably looking at like a late March release, and just depending on what it clashes with, maybe early April. But so unfortunately it's taken a lot more time with this record, but COVID-19's had that effect on a few things, so I'm gonna blame that.
Have you ever written for other people, like thought of writing songs and then putting it into publishing and putting those songs out there for other people, or those songs that you write, they're your babies?
Oh, there's definitely ones that I would like to be out in that kind of arena. There's a couple of really poppy songs that I wouldn't do. Like, I love them, I think they're great, but it's just so outside my kind of curriculum.
Yep.
So I think now with the means that I've got, I might just start doing that a little bit more in every song I write. Just make sure it's down and then put it to people instead of going, oh no, that doesn't suit me. I might put, flag that one. So I'm sort of just getting into the zone now of just sort of finishing everything I write. So having a little bit of a file full to be able to give my publishers and see if they've got get any love anywhere with it.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you sing every day? How do you maintain your voice, especially?
No.
Okay.
I should. No, alcohol, does that does that?
I think that's counterintuitive, isn't it? Doesn't that kind of... No?
Maybe. No. No, I'm pretty lazy, to be fair, but when I need to, I'm kind of one of those people who say they're going to do stuff and be like, yeah, Monday.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, next Monday.
Yep.
And then I'll go, holy shit, I've got something coming up, and then go really freaking hard to make sure I'm in form. I'm pretty lucky. I'm a natural
I understand
singer.
Yep.
So I'm pretty lucky in regards to the fact that I don't have to work my ass off every day. But when I do, I definitely do. So at the moment, I'm kind of all or nothing. So I'm about to go on all phase, where just in the last few days, booking everything. Like there will be very minimal days off for the next sort of 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So that's what's going to happen, and then I'll be able to present to you a new record, hopefully very soon, which is weirdly exciting.
That's really cool. Really looking forward to it. All right, Hollie Smith, thanks so much for spending this time with me tonight and talking about your career and some of the shit you've been to, plus some of the great stuff as well. And really looking forward to the new album and sort of following your progress on social media, whatever you show us, and hopefully you can get out here and do some shows.
Yeah, definitely. All you motherfuckers need to wear masks and stay inside for a minute, and then we can open our little bubble together, and then we can all be touring around each other.
Yeah, well, there was talk before this last week that maybe September that bubble was going to open between Australia and New Zealand, but I don't know now.
Yeah, I think as soon as everything's under control, then that will definitely be what's going to happen. But I think, and even then, like you're saying, like you just got told that like your borders were going to like shut down between states, right? So, I mean, even if those borders are held tight, then we could still have bubbles with certain states, I think, which has been discussed. But I mean, realistically, it's just, I mean, everyone who comes through has got to do quarantine and shit.
Yep.
Actually, I've got some stuff coming up with Don McGlashan for a Te-Reo version of Bath.
Oh, cool.
Yep. And just had a meeting with him yesterday. He's in Canada, and he's, for the stuff we're doing mid-September, he's like sort of leaving late August to be able to quarantine for 2 weeks before he can come on board to do anything. So, it's some pretty crazy shit. But yeah, everyone who's listening, I hope you're all doing well, and it's such a crazy time. I know it's a very up and down time emotionally and for mental health, and I hope everyone's looking after themselves and being kind to themselves, and I think we've shown pretty incredible resilience and how we can accept and meld our way, meld a different way of life if necessary, and it takes its toll. But I think in the general oversight of the human race currently, a lot of things are not giving me faith, but then also a lot of things are giving me huge amounts of faith, and I just hope that everyone's being safe and looking after themselves, and I wish everyone very well on this bizarre fucking 2020 that we are currently finding ourselves in.
Very well said, mate.
Hey, Kanye for president.
Oh,
fuck
what about
yeah.
that?
Oh, my Lord.
Oh, classic. All right, Hollie, thanks again, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay,
all
cheers, buddy.
Cheers, sweet.
Okay,
cool.
Bye.
Your mind, and tell me, sisters, yeah, can you take the road up high and not make excuses, yeah, and live life the soul in that soldier.